So we've been talking about what is required in order to develop mental equipoise. This ability to rest in the present moment without distraction. And in that discussion, then we've talked about the importance of acceptance. That's the ability to accept past trauma and hardship, but also to be able to accept difficulty and negativities that arise in the present moment. Likewise, we've talked about the need to be free from hope and fear. That's the expectation for gaining results or rewards in the future, and also this fear of failure or fear of future negative circumstances arising in our practice. And by these means, what we hope to do is to develop meditative equipoise. Now, the conclusion that most people come to when they hear the instructions on meditation is that what they need to do is eliminate thought. We have to stop thinking about the past or thinking about the future and just rest in presence. Something that we identify as the present moment, that is unobscured by cognitive activity. But what you have to understand is that this in itself is a form of non-acceptance, or a form of falling sway to hope and fear. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to drop everything. We're trying to stop thought. And that brings us to the next instruction that you often hear on the path of meditation. And that is merely to rest in the present moment, and whatever thoughts arise, just to observe them, not grasping after those thoughts or trying to drive them away. And along with this comes the third instruction. And that third instruction is not to alter the present moment of experience. That means not to try to fix or change one's experience. And by fixing or changing one's experience, for example, we could say that we would want to stop thought. What we experience in the present moment isn't correct, isn't right, and what we need to do is get rid of it, or to improve it. And this, ultimately, is an obstacle to one developing equipoise, equanimity. That's this ability to accept and recognize the present moment for what it is. Now, initially, all of these practices are methods. They're methods to allow us to develop this state of meditation, if that indeed is something that can be developed. Now, from the outside, then this instruction, just to remain with whatever thought arises, seems to be in contradiction to our basic meditation instruction. On this basic idea that what we need to do is stop thinking. It almost seems as if this instruction is giving us permission to daydream, just to think whatever we want. The important point is that we're not clinging after experience. Ultimately, in meditation, it's not about dropping thought or developing profound states of samadhi, resting in peace and tranquility, but to develop the mind that has complete acceptance, that is open. This is a sign of somebody who has a high level of meditation. They become extremely open-minded. And so, because of this, the adepts of the past seemed strange to us. They engaged in what seemed to be very odd behavior, and did things that don't seem to be in any way related to the spiritual path. In fact, they acted in ways that seemed to be contrary to the moral conduct and discipline that is associated with spiritual traditions. Now, there's a danger here, because when we hear the instruction that there is no good and bad, that there is no path to tread, there's nothing to be fixed, then what we do is we jump to the conclusion that we can do whatever we want, and that it's okay. Ultimately, for somebody who has realized the profound truth of emptiness, then they are incapable of committing negative acts. That's what's taught. When Padampa Sanjay was asked, is somebody who has realized emptiness capable of committing wrong deeds? And Padampa Sanjay said, it is not possible, because once one has developed this wisdom of emptiness, along with that comes compassion. And so someone who has realized emptiness is not or no longer able to commit wrong deeds. Now, wrong deeds aren't necessarily associated with the outward look of the act itself. For example, you could do something that appeared to be quite negative on the outside, but was based on a positive or beneficent motivation. This transforms the apparent act, which seems to be non-virtuous, into a virtuous act. But the important thing here is that somebody who has realized emptiness no longer has any self-clinging. And without the basis for negativities, and the basis for negativities is taught to be self-clinging, then that individual is no longer able to act in a negative way. So anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. This is a difficult topic, and it's not one that's easily understood. The question is, how can we apply these profound teachings to our own very ordinary meditation practice? Well, as beginners, it's very difficult for us to rest in equipoise. In fact, we don't even know what that is. We assume it's a state without thought, similar to sleep, or perhaps a state where we're resting in a virtuous appearance, for example, bliss or clarity. And what is taught is that we just need to remain in the present moment, and then whatever thoughts or mental experiences arise, then we just let go of them. We don't cling on to them, and also we don't try to chase them away. So as you can see, this contradicts the idea that what we need to do is get rid of thoughts. We need to get rid of thoughts of the past, get rid of thoughts of the future, and remain in some sort of blank state in the present moment. It is the case that in some spiritual traditions, then they try to develop this perceptualist state, a state of non-thought. And this is the basis of many of the Hindu practices. But in terms of the Buddha Dharma, and especially the Buddha Dharma of the Mahayana vehicle, then that is not the goal of our meditation. And when it comes to the practices of Dzogchen and Mahamudra or Mahasandhi, then it doesn't matter whether you think or not. In fact, nothing matters, except that that individual has recognized the true nature, the essential nature of phenomena. But that's not an easy thing to do. And in order to do that, we need to develop some mental stability. And in order to develop mental stability, then we have to use methods. And those methods are associated with these practices. Accepting past trauma. Accepting difficulties that arise in the present moment. Not giving rise to feelings of hopes, expectations, and fears of failure in the future, and also not trying to alter the present moment of awareness. So as you can see from this, then it's not appearances that are the problem. Thoughts and experiences are not what afflict us. As Tilopa said to Naropa, "Naropa, my son, it is not appearances that bind you, it is your clinging." And this is the root of it, as I've said many times before. The purpose of all spiritual practice is to reduce clinging. And it is to the extent that we reduce our clinging that we achieve realization and progress on the spiritual path. And because of that, then naturally, some spiritual paths do not take one as far as others. Because in some spiritual paths, we cling to the reality of specific things. In theistic religions, we cling to the supremacy of God and the reality of God. And in other traditions, then we cling to notions of non-duality, etc. Ultimately, what we have to achieve is this state of suchness. That is, the state of recognition of just how things are. And it is these practices that lead to this state, but it's extremely difficult. So in general, in the middle turning of the wheel of Dharma, or the Mahayana, what we do is we use the technique of transformation. We transform what we see to be negative experiences into positive ones. And we do this through motivation, through developing what we call bodhicitta, that is the loving kindness and compassion that is focused on all sentient beings, whether they be your friends, family, or enemies. In the Vajrayana practices, then what we need to do is recognize the essential nature, the true nature of phenomena. And that is a non-referential state that is beyond all elaborations. Now that is extremely difficult. So in many ways, it's easier for us to work with bodhicitta to develop understanding of the ultimate truth. And it is the case that this middle turning of the wheel of Dharma, practice of the Mahayana, the development of loving kindness and compassion lead to the ultimate realization of the truth. It's taught that the direct cause, or the supreme cause, for realizing ultimate bodhicitta is the development of relative bodhicitta. And when it comes to the higher level practices of the Vajrayana, then the cause is direct seeing of the truth. And that can be generated in different ways. Essentially, we have to remove our misconception one way or another. We are confused, we fall to all kinds of wrong view, and we have a lot of negative habitual tendencies. As long as we cling to things, in clinging to things, we see some things to be good, some things to be bad. We grasp after that which we want, and we try to push away that which we do not like. Then as long as we have this, we will not come to understand the abiding nature. So, if this is an incredibly difficult practice that beginners are not able to engage in, then what's the point of us practicing these forms of meditation? Well, as I said before, then it's primarily about faking it. It's about contriving our practice. Really, we have to contrive our practice. We have to contrive things in order to come to understand the uncontrived. And as it is taught in the Buddha Dharma, then there isn't actually anything that needs to be developed or to be uncovered. It's merely the way things abide naturally. But for us, we don't see the way things are naturally. For us, we have preconceptions, and we relate to things in a mistaken manner. And the reason why we relate to things in a mistaken manner is because we have this endemic notion of me and mine, this endemic or inherent belief in a self. And our entire perspective of the universe orbits around this fundamental ignorance or this fundamental belief in an independent, permanent, unchanging self. But it's okay to contrive it. It's okay to fake it. We have no other choice. We have to do that. Even the practice of bodhicitta is a contrived practice. Because a bodhisattva is somebody who has realized the truth of no self. That's the no self of me, myself, and other beings, and also phenomena. But at the same time, a bodhisattva is said to work for the benefit of sentient beings, even though they're illusionary. So that seems to be contradictory, right? It seems to be a self-contradictory statement. So whichever path you're on, then initially you have to work in a contrived manner. And by working in this contrived manner, what we do is we come closer to being able to realize the profound truth. But ultimately, we need to experience an epiphany or a leap-through moment. And the causes and conditions that can bring this about are uncertain. There are all kinds of methods that can be used, and some of them seem quite strange. So our job is to prepare ourselves, and we prepare ourselves in many ways. The primary way is to practice the preliminaries. And you have to understand that preliminaries are not just about doing massive numbers of repetitions of mantras and prostrations and things. The preliminaries are all about changing our fundamental way of relating to reality. And primarily what we need to do is we need to develop renunciation. We need to recognize that the mundane world is unsatisfactory. And as long as we're trapped within samsara, mundane world, then we're going to experience hardship. So in this way, we have to work in stages. First, we have to develop renunciation. That's a recognition that things aren't right and we just have to do something about it. We have no choice. The second is to develop what is called bodhicitta, is this loving kindness and compassion for sentient beings who we see to be real. So it's called relative bodhicitta. Now the purpose of bodhicitta is to eliminate self-concern. Because as you know, then it's taught the very root of samsara is this fundamental ignorance, which is the belief in a self. Self-concern, self-identification. And we need some means of getting rid of this. And it's so entrenched in our being that it's very hard for us to get rid of. And in order to do that, we need a supreme method. And the supreme method is taught to be the development of relative bodhicitta. When it comes to the Vajrayana practices, that's a whole different story. It's incredibly difficult, and it primarily depends on you having some lifetime after lifetime connection with a specific teacher. And through that teacher's skill and compassion and the student's devotion, then there is a kind of, we could say, magical interaction that can happen. that teacher can help to propel the student to come to realize or recognize the true nature of phenomena. And even a glimpse of that true nature is beneficial, because having a taste or a glimpse of the true nature, then one has a basis for practice. But something you have to understand is that just having a glimpse of the true nature isn't much use on its own, unless it's put to use in a practical way, in a useful way. And that's because even if we recognize the true nature, we are still afflicted, just as much as any ordinary sentient being. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is way beyond our level. First, we have to learn to practice the Dharma, and in order to practice the Dharma, then we have to progress in stages. And if we haven't even developed renunciation, then it's going to be very difficult. But you don't have to worry about that, because most people don't even have renunciation. I mean, we get annoyed with the mundane world. We get irritated by it, but very few people are willing or able to give up on the mundane world 100%. It's very rare. But there's still a lot we can do, because we're working with interdependence. We're working with karma, and that means if we establish good habits in this lifetime, those will carry through into future lifetimes, and we can grow from strength to strength. So anyway, I hope something I've said is of use to you, and if it is, then make sure that you put it into practice. Use it in your own meditation, and bear it in mind as you travel along the spiritual path. And until next time, then see you later.